Legendary mountain man Joe Meek is on the ride of his life. His wife, Mountain Lamb, has been captured by Crow warriors.
Whoa.
And he alone can save her.
What are you doing in Crow territory?
If you let me go, I will leave your territory.
And the white men?
My husband. He is the leader. He will listen to me.
White men. They will not listen!
Meek is outnumbered, and his fellow trappers are far behind. But if he doesn't act now, he could lose Mountain Lamb forever. Virginia native Joe Meek seeks adventure in the far west at a young age and quickly becomes one of the most accomplished trappers on the frontier.
Joe Meek wasn't crazy about school. He wanted to be on the frontier. He wanted to go to the mountains. When he gets to the Rockies in 1829, he just takes to that lifestyle. He's got some leadership ability. People are drawn to him.
In just a few years, he's climbed the ranks of mountain men. He's become successful. In some cases, he surpasses mountain men who have been working longer than he's even been alive.
One of the most notable aspects of Meek's personality was his sense of humor. He had a quick wit and was always at the ready with a tall tale.
And I'm telling you, my stomach was downright eating itself. So I stuck my hands into an anthill, and I waited until those boogers crawled up all the way to my elbows. And then I licked them off. It's true, it's true.
But there's more to him than that. He's also as bold, as daring, as adventurous as any of the mountain men.
This made Joe Meek a great guy to be with out in the wilderness. You knew he was going to tell you a great story, and if it only got tough, we wouldn't leave you behind.
As 1832 comes to an end, Joe Meek has been in the West for 3 years.
Joe Meek started in the fur trade at the very bottom. By this time, he's graduated to being a high-status employee of the Rocky Mountain Fur Company.
See any game? Nothing worth shooting at.
Cold weather has put a halt to trapping for the brigade led by Meek's friend, Milton Sublette.
Milton Sublette was one of 5 partners in the Rocky Mountain Fur Company. Even though Milton was one of the bosses, he and Joe were very close. They had spent a lot of time together. They had been through some pretty harrowing experiences together, and there was a bond there.
But if they're going to survive the coming winter, some tough decisions have to be made.
We had a good summer. Just about hunted this whole area out. Whole camp's got to move soon. If we stay here, you starve before winter's barely started.
I know it. I ain't seen as much as a single deer in a week.
Over-trapping and over-hunting have cleaned out the game in the area.
In the past decade, the Rocky Mountain fur trade has gotten increasingly competitive. The fallout from that competition is that the beaver streams are starting to be trapped out.
When you remove the beaver from the ecosystem, the rest of it collapses in its wake. For Milton Sublette, that lack of beaver was also one of the primary reasons he had to think on his feet and relocate his winter quarters to an area that was more bountiful.
But a full camp move is easier said than done.
Are you all right?
Old bullet wound I took down in Gila. Just stiff as all.
Milton Sublette had been wounded in 1826, and that wound had never properly healed. and it caused him an increasingly difficult limp.
Sublette doesn't just have his men to think of, but also his family.
Mountain Lamb was Milt Sublette's wife. She was well known in the mountains for a winning personality, for her incredible beauty. She could hold her own in the mountains against a really tough crew, and established herself as a real force amongst the mountain men.
We got stray horses grazing to the north. The camp's ready to move. You think you can round them up? Meet up with us in about a day's time? Can't afford to lose them.
You count on me, Milt. That's good coffee.
Milton picks Joe because he knows he can rely on him. You want to make sure that things are going to go as smooth as possible, especially in the middle of winter when you don't have a lot of room for error.
As cold weather approaches, the camp sets out on the treacherous journey.
How's that leg, Milt?
It's gonna take a lot more than an old war wound to slow me down, Joe. Me and Tom will ride on ahead. Make sure our friends at Hudson Bay haven't staked out the best grounds. The rest will follow. You all right to work alone?
Prefer it, actually.
I'm too young to be such a lonesome old soul, Joe. You and the baby stay with the others. I don't like the looks of this weather.
Don't worry about us.
Let's do it. Come on.
Whenever Sublette decides to move winter quarters, it's incredibly risky because you're moving at a time when the weather is terrible and unforgiving. You have to move supplies and men, and you could be vulnerable to attack from the outside, as well as simply succumbing to the elements. It's a very precarious situation.
Sublette leads his brigade southwest to a new camp on the Portneuf River. But as promised, Meek stays behind alone to corral the stray horses and follow the camp a day later.
Oh. If we don't keep moving, we're as good as dead. Come on.
January, Idaho Snake River country, we're talking just horrible, wicked weather.
But as the day goes on, the weather only gets worse, and Meek is shocked to see another lone figure on the trail.
Hey! Hey!
In the vicious winter squall, Mountain Lamb and her baby became separated from Milt Sublette's group.
My baby, so cold.
She's very cold. She's freezing. You know, it's snowing out. It's probably well below zero.
Getting caught out in the elements in the middle of winter in the Rocky Mountains was about as dangerous a situation as a person could be in. It will kill you quick.
Now, Mountain Lamb's survival rests entirely in Joe Meek's hands.
My baby is so cold.
When Joe Meek came upon Mountain Lamb and her child exposed to the elements, they were in real danger of dying. And Joe didn't hesitate.
Take my horse. It's sure-footed and fast.
But your coat, you'll die without it.
It's for the baby.
Now, this moment speaks to his bravery, his heroism, also his great fundamental humanity. That sight of a mother and child dying is something he simply can't countenance.
He was the kind of person who would literally give you the shirt off of his back if you needed it more than he did.
Now get moving. And don't you stop till you hear the crackle of campfire.
Hey, Joe.
Don't worry about me, just get going.
Meek sends Mountain Lamb ahead to catch the brigade as fast as possible.
I'll be fine. Hardly. I can't stay here all night.
But he has to remain with the invaluable horse herd.
As gallant as the gesture was in giving Mountain Lamb his jacket and basically his only protection from the elements, it left him in dire circumstances.
As night falls, the temperature plummets.
Come on. Come on. Come on, Joe.
And Meek may have saved Mountain Lamb's life, only to lose his own. On a freezing winter night, trapper Joe Meek has given up his coat to protect his best friend's wife and child.
Come on, Joe.
But now he is close to succumbing to the deadly cold himself. But at his lowest point, he gets a sign from above.
While Meek is out, borderline dying in a very stressful situation, and he happens to get a glimpse of the Northern Lights. And when you do see the Northern Lights, you're blown away by them. You're inspired.
That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Come on. Come on.
Seeing the Northern Lights filled him with such wonder that it empowered that love of life and that drive to keep going, and a sense of beauty in the world that he wasn't ready to leave.
Miles away, Mountain Lamb has safely returned to her husband Milton Sublet's camp. But the men are increasingly concerned that Meek is still missing.
Joe wasn't one to lose the trail. Something must have happened.
It's my fault he's out there at all. It's about time we assembled a search party.
Hard to find in all this country.
Whatever it takes, Tom.
Hello, camp.
Joe.
Joe?
Joe!
We're coming!
Come get these horses!
Hold on, Joe!
I knew you'd make it.
Just as a search party is about to depart, Meek makes it back to camp, nearly frozen, but with the herd of horses intact.
And it says something about his determination, his mental, his intestinal fortitude. That this is the type of thing that men like Meek were able to endure on a much more regular basis than any of us today.
Wait, you know better. We gotta warm up slowly. Let's warm him up slowly here.
When you're hypothermic, what your body's gonna do is it's gonna start restricting blood flow to your extremities.
Come on, buddy, warm up. Okay, before we get you to that fire.
It's gonna hold blood into the core where it's gonna keep your organs warm, at the expense of your feet, your legs.
Warming up Meek's frozen extremities too fast would be excruciatingly painful. So the trappers rub his arms and legs to get his blood flowing again, until he's finally able to sit by the fire.
Oh, we lost you to the plains. It's good to have you back.
You don't believe what I saw out there, Tom. Dancing suns. Up in the sky. I swear on my life.
Barely back from the dead, boys, and he's already telling tall tales.
You saved the lives of my family, Joe. I'm forever in your debt.
This whole incident where Joe Meek nearly sacrifices himself to save Mountain Lamb shows her who he really is. There were a lot of tough men on the frontier, a lot of strong men, but there weren't a lot of gentlemen at that time. And I think maybe it's the first time that she sees him as a potential protector.
In the years since Meek's winter rescue, his reputation on the frontier has only grown.
By the mid-1830s, he's gained seniority among mountain men. He's a good hunter, he's an experienced fighter, but he possesses something almost more important. He's a very courageous person, he's a very brave individual.
And he's leveled up from company man to independent trapper.
By becoming independent, you need to pay for your own provisions, you need to sell your own pelts. There's more risk, but there's also potentially more reward. That's a gamble that Meek's willing to take.
Come on.
Hello, Joe.
Hey, how you doing, Jake?
Good, where you been?
The free trappers were the elite. They were beholden to nobody. They could go where they pleased, when they pleased, and they were probably as free as any person has been in American history.
Not too bad, huh?
Here, you might need this.
Thank you.
But Meek's new status isn't the only change in the mountains.
Milt Sublette has been suffering from a long, festering wound. He's in very poor health. And so he sort of cashes in. And he leaves Mountain Lamb and he leaves Meek, and he goes back to St. Louis, where, sadly, he dies of his old injury.
Meek and Mountain Lamb both mourn the loss of Milt Sublette. But the connection that was kindled in the bleak winter blossoms into something more.
Life as a mountain man can be an incredibly solitary one. Joe Meek probably didn't realize how much he missed just the company of a partner until he really met Mountain Lamb.
Get behind it. Okay. Pull your hand back here. Line these up. Now hold steady. Keep your eye on the target and then breathe out. And then when I give the okay.
You were saying?
Nothing at all. Nice shot, my dear.
They were equals in every respect, in personality, in strength, and there could not have been a better union made, and it was because they wanted to be with each other. The fact that she would really want to be with this mountain man, that was different back then.
Mountain Lamb and Joe Meek's relationship was one of the great romances of the Mountain Man era. This was true love, and she proved to be a wonderful wife and a wonderful mother.
But for a mountain man, a quiet life of domestic bliss can only last so long.
Even though Joe Meek is a free trapper, he continues to ride with and work with Jim Bridger and his other companions from the Rocky Mountain Fur Company. That's mostly out of personal loyalty. These people were his friends, and he stuck by them.
Meek's latest expedition takes him to the West Yellowstone area, the home of the Blackfeet, and teams him with one of the most famed frontiersmen of all time, Kit Carson.
Kit Carson, by this point, is one of the most experienced mountain men in the region. And he knows that if you're going to be in Blackfeet country, you better sleep with one eye open.
Meek and Carson have stumbled upon a hunting party employed by Nathaniel Wyeth, who have been ravaged by the Blackfeet.
Nathaniel Wyeth was a New England entrepreneur who had entered the fur trade, but his people were very inexperienced, and he was very inexperienced, and they frequently got themselves into trouble.
It's a wonder Blackfeet haven't finished you off. Best thing that you can do is come back with us to Bridger's camp.
Well, the difference between our Blackfeet and the trappers were being motivated by profit, and our Blackfoot Confederacy was motivated by the indigenous vision. Coordinated harmony, rhythm, and balance with the ecosystem and with the spiritual world, and very much the American fur trappers were at odds with this objective.
Wyeth's men have no food, no guns, and no way to defend themselves. In Blackfeet country, this is a death sentence.
Talk to you. Listen, these men are in no condition to travel. Suppose you stay here. Tom and I will go to Bridger's camp, get horses and provisions. They're in tough shape. That's a fact. Only make the trip more dangerous traveling with weakened men. Tom. Yeah. Let's go. Get. Keep your eyes open, Joe. You're in Blackfoot country now.
While Carson stays with the unlucky trappers, Meek and Liggett set out on a supply run to Bridger's camp.
Meek's decision to help Wyeth's group is really a risky one. They go back to get provisions and supplies, which is great. But through Blackfeet country moving so slowly and dividing up your own resources, it's a recipe for disaster.
In Blackfeet country, even a veteran like Joe Meek is vulnerable. And now, it's the rescue party that needs a miracle. On a mission to retrieve food and weapons for a party of trappers attacked by Blackfeet, mountain man Joe Meek now finds himself in the crosshairs of one of the most powerful tribes on the frontier.
The Blackfeet were one of the most feared and respected tribes in the American plains. They were skilled horsemen, adept fighters, just all around brave warriors. They took a very hard line when it came to what they saw as an invasion of white settlers.
The Blackfeet dominate a large swath of the northern Rockies and are determined to defend their territory.
And our Blackfeet were solid, and we were well equipped, and we had to the west the purest, most beautiful water, and we had more buffalo than there are stars in the sky. This was sacred. Our Blackfeet had an added incentive to fight against that which was threatening the sacred.
The Blackfeet people's reputation as bloodthirsty and vicious was already well known, even as Lewis and Clark made their way up the Missouri. That reputation escalated much faster as Blackfeet essentially neutralized the trapping forces that were attempting to encroach on our homelands.
We gotta get back to Carson! We can't hold them off, just the two of us!
Meek's options aren't great in this situation, but he understands that he has a much better chance of survival if he's in a larger group than by himself or in a smaller group.
Meek has only one option.
We're gonna shoot and go!
Run and pray he makes it back to camp alive.
Ready?
But back at camp, Kit Carson is about to learn that nowhere is safe.
The Blackfeet people were eager to communicate their disappointment in the trappers' lack of ecological management skills. And when the appropriate respect was not followed with trapping, Blackfeet people met a lot of these trappers with force.
Take cover, boys. Let's move, let's go! Keep your head down!
Carson is absolutely ruthless in his dealings with the Indians, and he understands that the Blackfeet don't respect weakness.
Essentially alone with a trapping party of greenhorns, Carson prepares himself for a fight to the death.
Carson! Blackfeet behind us!
Meek has returned to camp alive, but it may be too late.
Appreciate the accuracy, Kit. How many of them are there?
Hard to tell. More than us. Leave them. Ain't nothing you can do for them anymore.
The fight with the Blackfeet is remarkable in displaying the aspects of the personalities of the mountain men. Kit Carson displays ruthlessness that kind of surprises Joe Meek. Carson has been through a lot, and he really understands that mercy is not viewed as a virtue by anyone in the mountains.
Meek and Carson both know that their odds of survival are slim, and they hunker down for what could be their last fight. For hours, mountain men Joe Meek and Kit Carson had held off an attack by Blackfeet warriors. But as fatigue and exhaustion set in, the Blackfeet's guns fall silent.
Wait. What for?
You really see the difference between Kit Carson and Joe Meek in a circumstance like this. Meek is measured, Meek is calm, Meek is discerning. Carson will fight at the drop of a hat, and he won't stop until the fighting is done. He'll kill everyone if he has to.
Carson's heroism and steely resolve are unquestionable, but it's also the case that at this stage in his career, he often doesn't know when to quit.
Carson, just wait. Something's up.
Sometimes his zeal for battle blinds him to changes in the environment. These are changes that somebody like Joe Meek is able to perceive because he's a cooler customer. He's more level-headed, more inclined, to see if talking or negotiation is a way out of a violent confrontation that could cost everyone involved their lives.
Just when Carson and Meek think they may have to make a final stand, the Blackfeet decide to pull back.
The goal of Blackfeet people at this time was not necessarily to destroy these trappers and traders, but to leave them constantly wary and afraid and nervous and without resources, and to be able to send that message to other trappers that this was not a welcoming place So when the leader made the decision to retreat, it was because the goal was chaos and destruction and fear, and that was accomplished.
I'll give him a proper burial. He died a fighter.
Meek manages to survive what could have been a deadly encounter. But this isn't the last time a hunting trip will pit him against Plains warriors. It turns out his most harrowing adventure is yet to come. Months after his adventure with Kit Carson, Meek organizes a bison hunting party in the Powder River Valley. The group includes his wife, Mountain Lamb.
With any type of hunting and harvesting, especially with bison, women were responsible for cutting up and field dressing that animal, for quickly and safely and cleanly removing the hide, cutting the animal into quarters, and harvesting and packing everything.
Ooh. Right there.
Yeah, it's a nice herd.
Extra feed us for winter. Keep us warm, too.
Go around that backside of the ridge.
I like that.
Meek knows he's encroached on the hunting grounds of the Crow.
Let's go get him.
Go, come on.
But the need for food outweighs the risk.
Go on ahead. I'll be all right.
Mountain Lamb is a very efficient and effective and experienced horsewoman. She's no shrinking violet. When her horse goes up lame, she figures she can handle this circumstance by herself.
But Mountain Lamb's independence separates her from the rest of the party. And soon, she is completely alone. A band of Crow warriors have spotted Mountain Lamb. And they are dead set on punishing the intruders. Joe Meek's wife, Mountain Lamb, has fallen behind their hunting party and into the sights of a band of Crow warriors looking for payback on the buffalo hunters that have come to the Powder River Valley.
Buffalo were central to the economic, cultural, and spiritual life of the Crow people. The Crow have seen how these whites treat the land, and they know what's coming. The animal upon which their entire culture is founded, their entire subsistence depends, is suddenly under the threat of extinction.
Mountain Lamb, being off by herself, separated from the main party, put herself in a very vulnerable position. And when this Crow raiding party see her alone, it's like easy pickings.
But miles away, Meek hasn't yet noticed his wife is missing.
Tom!
Yeah.
Woo! Let's go get our dinner, huh?
Well done.
Thanks, Tom. Hey, where's Mountain Lamb?
When Meek sees that Mountain Lamb is missing, this sends off red flags right away. He knows she would never just get lost or get left behind unless something terrible happened.
Tom, something's not right.
She was on the ridge.
Gather the rest of the men. Tell them to follow me. Come on.
Hey, Meek, wait!
As Joe Meek rushes to find Mountain Lamb, he can only pray he's not too late.
What are you doing in Crow territory? All by yourself.
If you let me go, I will leave your territory.
And the white men?
My husband. He is the leader. He will listen to me.
White men.
They will not listen!
Look at you. Dressed like a white woman.
The Crow recognized the value of who that person was, and that's why they took her.
But you will not fool me, Shoshone.
The taking of Mountain Lamb was the ultimate message sent to the trappers that you're not welcomed here and we'll do whatever it takes to get you to leave.
Come on.
Joe Meek rides as fast as he can to save his wife.
Oh.
And finally, he sees her.
I can only imagine the panic and the fear that Joe Meek feels when Mountain Lamb is taken captive. He spent the last several years of his life really just taking care of himself. Now he has someone to live for. Now he has someone to fight for. And he's not going to give her up that easy.
Where are you, Tom?
The backup that Meek is counting on is nowhere in sight.
Meek knows that if he doesn't do something that he's not accustomed to doing, act quickly, almost impulsively, it's very likely that he'll never see Mountain Lamb again.
Meek prepares for what could be his last ride. He's either going to bring Mountain Lamb home or die trying. With his wife Mountain Lamb captured by Crow warriors and the rest of his men far behind him,
Where are you, Tom?
Joe Meek launches a desperate solo rescue attempt.
Joe Meek charged at the Crow at a full gallop, and they must have been extremely startled to see this wild man bearing down on them.
As the rider gets closer, it's clear that he's not letting up. He's coming directly for them.
Meek's bold charge initially scatters most of the Crow warriors.
They perceive this as an audacious display of big medicine and begin to immediately rethink whether keeping this captive is going to be worth it.
Are you all right? I'm okay. Take cover. For the bushes, for the bushes.
The surviving crow regroup for a counterattack.
Here, take that. Well, we're in a bit of a fix, my darling. Here. Nice shot.
Outnumbered by the crow, Meek's reunion with Mountain Lamb may be short-lived. Until Thomas Liggett and the rescue party finally arrive. What the crow thought was an easy capture is now anything but. So the survivors beat a hasty retreat.
You all right?
I'm safe.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Never in my life have I seen anything like it. One man charging in on a whole group like that.
He's very brave.
I reckon the crows don't want to tangle with old Joe Meek again, huh, fellas? Come on, let's go.
In a stunning display of courage, Meek has saved the life of his true love.
The rescue of Mountain Lamb is a classic Joe Meek move. When somebody that he cared about was in danger, he would act, and he would act in the moment. It wasn't even a matter of bravery. It was what needed to be done, and he would always step up to do that.
We should get back to camp.
Not yet. We still have a hunt to finish.
Joe Meek embodied the true values of the frontier, which blended that sense of rugged individualism with a real sense of community.
Good to see you.
He was a lovable guy. He treated his friends well. So it's this personality that we cheer for looking back on it. He was like a cool guy. He would have been a guy you wanted to hang out with.
Nice shot, no!
Joe Meek goes down in history as one of the great mountain men and explorers of the American West. He goes down in history as one of the bravest mountain men in the American frontier, and he plays an important role in the eventual settlement of the American frontier.
For some on the frontier, route forward was a violent one, but Meek was one of the men who was able to transcend that. This is, in some ways, a testament to that American dream of transformation. You can write your own story, and that's what Joe Meek did.